When you spent half your political life dealing with humdrum issues like the environment, exciting to have a real crisis on your hands. Margaret Thatcher, 1982, commenting on the Falkland Islands War. I came across that one some years ago, and I've always remembered it, so it was opportune to mention it this morning. But, interestingly, she did actually change her mind, and that was one of the benefits, I guess, of why she was such a strong leader, because later on she said, in 1989, just before we started to change building regulations in terms of the need to respect our earth, our environment, she said, what we are now doing to other worlds is new in the experience of the earth. It is mankind and his activities that are changing the environment of our planet in damaging and dangerous ways. So she was the first world leader to put onto the map that we had an issue. And that is so, so important in terms of where we're going today and the need for a fabric-first approach. Interestingly, one of the things that she tried to tackle was obviously issues around the way we operate our business in terms of energy. She made some decisions in terms of it's privatised and so on. But we are now looking at a situation that we are really going to be struggling over the next few years to provide enough energy from clean resources to meet our needs. We'll have to hang on to those high carbon issues in the future. So what is the risk of the lights going out? You've seen lots of press about this over the last couple of years. If we are going to be having the lights out in 2015, that is going to be a bit of a shock to some. I know that the government, I'm working very, very closely with the government, as many of you know, are looking at reserve supplies, looking at what hospitals do in case of a shutdown, what other situations might occur. So this is a very serious situation. But we are building lots and lots of offshore windmills, as I call them. I'm still traditionalist in that way. The amount of embodied energy going into building these things is quite colossal, and the amount of effort that goes into these things. I understand that the blades have to be changed every 5 years because of the amount of stress they're put through. If it's offshore, you can imagine the amount of effort that has to go into just changing a single blade. And some of these are very, very large pieces of equipment. And in terms of equipment, how bizarre we get. Are we going to rotate this building to gain to the benefit of the wind, or are we going to just hope that the wind always blows in a particular direction to capture the wind resource that we need to provide this clean energy? Well, is there an alternative? Absolutely there is. Absolutely, we must have one for the future. Why do I like off-site solutions? Why do I like solutions such as what the UKTFA promote? Well, there's lots of benefits. We have a reduced carbon efficiency in the way we deliver materials. We actually can create more space because of the designs we create. We can actually create a lot of diversity with the products. And again, we can actually ease complexity. And I think all of those things are something that are of interest to our industry. But more important than that, there are several other things. I mentioned about the embodied carbon is one of the things that's beginning to get onto the government's agenda. I've got a meeting with government directors of DCLG tomorrow morning, looking at what we are going to be doing next in terms of this area. And one of the issues we'll be discussing is what we're going to do with the embodied carbon in products. But the versatility, I think we've got to remember that a fabric-first approach is something that is fit and forget. It is the way forward, it keeps it simple, and it is something that the consumer who actually has to operate these buildings, or the end user, will find very, very functional. And believe it or not, this building is going back over 500 years, still working as a building. It does combine both masonry and timber frame. And I think if you look at all of our products on a fabric-first approach, the Zero Carbon Hub doesn't mind what it's made out of, Lego bricks or timber frame, masonry, but we do think there should be a fabric-first approach in everything we do. But I also want to mention very quickly about the Zero Carbon Hub. Many of you may not have heard of us, and just can I have a quick show of hands who has not heard of the Zero Carbon Hub? Well, there's one or two in the room that haven't heard of the Zero Carbon Hub. So I just thought I'd spend maybe just 30 seconds just to explain. We were created just a few years ago by government and industry. to facilitate the mainstream delivery of low and zero carbon homes working across all the borders. We're not bothered whether it's in Northern Ireland or Scotland, Wales, or indeed England. But we also get involved with the existing homes through the Green Deal and also through into the non-residential sector as well. We're providing leadership in creating confidence, reducing risk, and most of all about disseminating information, like the opportunity we've had today from Andrew in the UKTFA. One of the things what we do every 3 months is we actually look at the journey to certain critical dates in the way we actually have to deliver zero carbon products, zero carbon homes, particularly 2016 for homes, 2019 for non-domestic buildings. But we are always mindful of the 2020 timeline, where we have to try to meet government's European directives, which are also requiring, at the moment, nearly zero energy buildings from 2020. And again, I've been in discussions a few weeks ago with the DCLG and DEC, looking at the impact of what that might mean for our industry. And we actually look at a number of topics that affect the journey to zero carbon homes. We're looking at the issues around the Energy Performance Building Directive. We're looking at the way we can scale up our innovative products into mainstream delivery. But most of all, and most critical, is that we have a number of things on red, and we have 5 categories which we actually report back to government on. And I've got a meeting with the Minister in May where we'll be discussing all of these topics individually. And a number of them are on red because they are not ready for the delivery of Zero Carbon Homes 2016. In fact, the overall status is red amber. And I've got a meeting, as I say, tomorrow, because one of the issues on the agenda for tomorrow with the DCLG directors is the concern that this is going to go red. And that will have huge implications to the plans that government have got to deliver zero carbon homes from 2016. There are 2 issues that are particular of interest. Overheating. We can't believe we're discussing overheating as it's been minus whatever temperature it's been for the last 3 months. But actually, overheating is beginning to get quite a high issue on the journey for zero carbon homes, because there is a risk that we'll need more energy to keep ourselves cooler in the future. In fact, I predict that we'll have a Green Deal to actually cool buildings down in 2050, because we'll have a problem with overheating. So it's something that when we do a fabric-first approach, we need to be mindful that we actually build and design houses today that are going to last 100 years, and in terms of a timber frame product, probably much, much longer. But we must actually consider the implications of that design when temperatures change. And I'll cover those temperature changes later on. But we've also got a gap. We've also got a performance gap that occurs between the design performance of a building and the actual performance when it is built complete, before the occupants move in. I'll cover that as well shortly. I guess at the end of the day, the most important thing that you're all sat in the room thinking is, it's all very well, Rob, you preaching at the front about carbon dioxide and the benefits of the leadership that we had back in the 80s about trying to do something about saving the planet, but what about the cost? And I think the Zero Carbon Hub does reflect, and all the work it does, working with organisations like UKTFA and others, that we do try to consider what is the cost of saving a tonne of carbon. And one of those issues is again, coming up on a continual basis with government officials. So what is the UK government and European policy and the zero carbon agenda? Well, this has been the same zero carbon hierarchy that's been set out by government for the last 7, 8, 9 years now. It has 3 component parts. We have energy efficiency, which is the building fabric performance, where we have the benefit of enhancing the fabric to the most advanced level. We have the middle part of the triangle, which is the on-site low and zero carbon energy, which we actually call the carbon compliance standard. This is the on-site heat and power generation. This is where we talk about those add-ons that we typically see put onto buildings to achieve a certain standard, maybe through planning, maybe through other requirements. And then the top part of the triangle is this very mysterious allowable solutions. I have been predicting for the last 2 years that I thought this was on its knees. I thought it was going to die. I never thought it was going to be delivered. But surprisingly, in the budget, it was stated that there would be a consultation on allowable solutions by the recess of Parliament, which is going to be around about mid-July. I've been asked by the government to actually start putting together a team to consider how we actually move from 5% to 95% by that particular date. So nothing like a challenge, because that is really, really complex to move from 5% to 95% in a few weeks. We've got to literally form a number of work groups to start studying this issue. So that's been addressed. One of the things that I will be talking about with government, again, continuously saying it's got to be a fabric-first approach. So if the fabric-first approach is taken on board by all the local authorities across the UK, we will have an easier journey towards allowable solutions. 2016, one of my predictions, I still feel very uncomfortable that that's a date we can deliver. I'm not sure the industry is actually capable in a position to deliver 2016. And again, when I meet the Minister next month, I'm taking him to a site actually in Southampton, just to have a bit of one-to-one time with him to show him about the complexities of what we're trying to do. What we can say is the fabric first is well placed to meet this date. I'm not sure about the other component parts. Pannell 2013, well, we do know, well, I know, that we are going to get some information at the end of May. So that is important. We will be told by the end of May, Pannell 2013, what is going on. It has been delayed. There are reasons why it's been delayed, and I can't go into those because they are confidential. But I am being told the latest information from the Minister himself is saying, look, Rob, don't panic. It is going to be out by the end of May, so we're waiting to see. In terms of the Energy Performance Directive, we must be mindful about what Europe wants. We are part of Europe. We have to be mindful of what they want, and that is going to affect future regulations as we go forward. And there's also this review of the standards that you're aware of. So the code's been reviewed, the lifetime homes has been reviewed, space standards, etc., are all being reviewed. And again, that's going to be coming out in a couple of months' time as well, hopefully through a full consultation. But I want to just reflect a little bit on the fabric first and why it's important. And look at the carbon culprits. Well, interestingly, hot water in homes is still a big issue, 21%. We also have the bigger issue of space heating, 53%. Fabric first, you can resolve, in fact, as one Tyrone timber frame, we'll be talking later on, I think, Andrew. They've got a product actually requires no heating. Well, fantastic. Look at the carbon we're saving by that sort of innovative product and methodology. But let's look at the other products as well. This isn't just about homes. This is about all buildings. We've also got there 46% of space heating actually in non-domestic buildings. So another big issue that has to be tackled. And again, I believe that we should be looking at a fabric-first approach as well for non-domestic buildings. Whenever you look at an opportunity to buy a piece of land, what is the first thing you look at? You get the opportunity comes through from a land agent, and you start to look at it, and you go, right, we need to consider planning. What are the issues around? What is the planner going to expect on this development? What about access? What about location, flood risk, the site layout, what you're going to plot on it, etc. Maybe even localism, as Kevin mentioned earlier. But there are things that we need to be considering right at the front of the development. It's never thought about until far too late. And that is, what is the energy strategy for this development going to be? And that is so fundamental going forward. And if it is, the energy strategy is a fabric-first approach, absolutely bang on the money. That's what we should be saying right at the front, right to the planner, and saying to the planner, I'm going to give you an excellent product. It doesn't need all these add-ons because I can deliver a fabric-first approach, reducing energy, reducing carbon. Let's just dive into a bit of detail very quickly, looking at the energy efficiency standard at the bottom of the triangle I presented earlier. We have U values. Now, I'm actually doing a bit of work looking at U values. I actually believe they've been at fault for many of our miscalculations for some time, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But also thermal mass. What about thermal mass? Does it have an important role to play or not? I've actually seen some really good timber frame products using innovative ways to create thermal mass. Actually, not in this country, actually in Denmark, but I'm sure we can learn a lot of things from other countries as well. Thermal bridging. Biggest cheat in town. Does anyone want to know how to cheat on thermal bridging? Just speak to me afterwards and I'll tell you that doesn't matter how. In fact, I had a discussion over dinner last night with colleagues from the UKTFA. It is something that we've got to tackle. It is a big issue, but we need to understand more about how we calculate it and prove it. We're all very familiar now with air permeability, so we should be okay with that. Again, Fabric First can create very, very good low air permeability rates, and they're very, very successfully used and encouraged. But one of the things that we have to keep mindful of is the orientation, the solar gains and the glazing proportions on buildings. Again, it seems to be creeping in as a bit of an afterthought, but it's so critical we get this right at the beginning. So what do we expect to see in terms of future building regulations? And again, I've been in discussions about backstops for Pannell 2013 and what they should be. But here's just a typical slide with some expected future practice against current practice. We can argue about these for forever, so we're not going to have too much discussion. But if you want to go towards passive house standard, you can. That is taking the product to the highest possible level. But I always class the passive house standard as a bit like a Ferrari. We all would love to have one. They're well engineered, they're well designed, but they can be a bit expensive. I don't know how many of you own a Ferrari in the room, but I personally don't. But there are ways of driving that cost down, and that's getting to mass production of these things. So in terms of what does it mean in terms of timber frame, what are those big specifications and the specifications relating to those different levels? If you want to go towards the passive house, you're probably looking at the specification D, where we're looking at probably a considerable amount of insulation. But that's not bad, actually, and it's much, much less than you'll see on other products. So the things within the energy efficiency standard to reinforce what they are, it's talking about the U values, it's talking about thermal bridging, air permeability, thermal mass, and then any gains you get from your solar metabolic lighting and appliance gains. And the other thing we should always be considering is, well, what actually happens if you go towards passive house? Your walls get considerably thicker. What does that mean? Well, you might start plotting these particular units on a development and then realise that you're no longer getting 10 to the acre or 20 to the acre. You are actually getting fewer units because of that design. There are ways of doing it with other insulation methodologies, but fabric first still has to be the right way forward. So I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes just talking about the performance gap. This is the gap between the design performance and the as-built performance. And colleagues of mine, we have a retained architect, Richard Partington Architects, and myself, we'd actually developed this tube map where we actually think it's not actually a performance gap, it's a knowledge gap. And this is where I think events such as today are so important. But do all of our products do exactly what it says on the tin? Do all of the products that we use in manufacturing, in construction, actually do what they say on the tin? Does your car do the miles per gallon it says in the brochure? That's a question for all of you. Does your car do what it says in the brochure? Well, no, because it's designed to protect on a rolling road, which we don't actually drive on. The number of ruts in my road where I live not far from here would definitely make my ability to achieve those levels very, very challenging. But not only that, we have an issue with what's on the packets, not only what's on the tin. And so there is issues across all industries, and I think that's one to be mindful of when we're told to get our house in order. So is there any background evidence for this? Yes, there are a number of topics around the core performance of buildings, and I'll just pick on my favourite subject, heat pumps. I actually like heat pumps if they're designed properly, installed properly, commissioned properly and used properly. Then they're very good, but they are being claimed to perform better than what they actually deliver. So we've actually put together, with government sponsoring a particular project, the hub's running, the government's given us nearly £500,000 of cash, which is unusual in this economic climate, to actually take forward looking at this performance gap. It's really important that we change from the design performance to the as-built performance. And we've set up an industry executive committee with a steering group, and we've got 10 working groups, 120 people mobilised to look into this. We've got some particularly senior people actually running the different groups. I won't try to mention any of them today, but you might recognise some of these names. Looking at all sorts of issues that may be applicable, from project concept and planning right the way through to construction, the way we verify buildings, the way we actually look at testing. We're looking at the whole gambit. In terms of fabric first, actually it's very, very quick and easy to assess a building's fabric, and we can use such techniques as thermography. Very quickly picks up an issue with a particular product. In fact, this particular one actually is coming out quite well. Those one or two issues that you can see, and it has my favourite subject on there, which is lintels. I actually hate lintels. I actually like heat pumps. I like fabric first, but I actually hate lintels because they do not perform anything like what they're supposed to do, and they make our buildings very, very difficult, particularly around thermal bridging. I know I'm running over time, Andrew. I do apologise, but I just want to mention overheating, because the government, DEFRA particularly, has come to the Zero Carbon Hub and said, Rob, can you keep reminding everybody about overheating? And I'm thinking, well, in the middle of winter, no one's interested, but I promised I'd do it, so I will. The reasons that they're worried is because we are going to expect a 6-degree temperature change over the next 100 years. Now, there is an error factor in this. It's only a prediction by computer modelling. But just to remind you all, you may have seen the slide before, but I'll reinforce the point. In 2003, it was really hot. Does anyone remember that summer of 2003? I was in France at the time, stood in the swimming pool, because we couldn't actually swim in the swimming pool, because everyone was stood in the swimming pool trying to keep cool. Really hot. 50,000 people died across Europe in that particular year through this overheating problem. We have to be mindful of it. We have a lot of information coming out through the Zero Carbon Hub, looking at overheating in new homes, where to start in terms of designing it out. Have a look at our website. It's really quite informative. If you have an issue with overheating and you want to provide some information to us, please do get in touch. The final thing in terms of Fabric First to mention is that we must remind ourselves that the indoor air quality is really important. We actually formed a particular task group looking at indoor air quality to ensure that people aren't going to end up looking like this in their homes. Because we need to ensure that carbon monoxide, which is a very serious issue currently, it's been a lot of press about it, is addressed, but lots of other gases and VOCs as well are also addressed. So Fabric First, most definitely, but let's consider those risks as well. Finally, I just want to put in my last slide is when we get to putting technology into buildings, we've got to get it right. This isn't the fault of the guy at the end, by the way, who put that in. That was a fault of poor coordination. This is where BIM comes in. This is where BIM is so important. It will hopefully resolve some of these peculiarities. And that job, actually the guy on site did a really good job to do such a neat job as he actually did. But that's the sort of challenges we have, and the solutions for this afternoon's meeting should be very interesting. If you're interested in zero carbon strategies, please have a look at what they might look like on our website. We have got ways of resolving the issues through carbon, reducing carbon and reducing energy use in buildings. Have a look at those strategies. Again, look at our website, and I'm quite sure you'll find that very informative. That's all from me. Thank you very much. I'm not sure I've got any time for any questions now, Andrew, but if you have, I'm glad to have them.